These mandalas that I'm going to be showing will be open to the east, not closed, open to receive the transpersonal, the transcendent light shining through. All things are to be transparent to transcendence. When a deity like Yahweh in the Old Testament says, "I'm final," he is no longer transparent to transcendence. He is not, as the deities of the older cultures, a personification of an energy which antecedes his personification. He says, "I'm it." And when the deity closes himself like that, we too are closed like that. So we're not open to transcendence either. And you have a religion of worship. Whereas when the deity opens, you have a religion of identification with the divine. And that was what Christ mentioned when he said, "I and the Father are one," and he was crucified for it. Halaj said the same thing, and all of these are saying the same things. We're particles of that mystery, that timeless, endless, everlasting mystery which pours forth from the abyss into the forms of the world. Then you see the main plants of their sustenance. Just as the animal of the hunter, the animal that is the principal animal of his life, becomes the animal master. So when planting comes in, the main plants are sanctified also. There are Pueblo myths and Huichol myths in Mexico telling of the corn maidens. And one of them, in one of these myths, is compelled by the young hero's mother to grind the corn. And as she's grinding, her own arms disappear, and she disappears. She's grinding herself away. Our whole life is sustained by the mystery life. And everything that you eat, whether vegetable or animal, is a life that is being given to you through its own willingness to become your own life substance. So all of these mandalas that I'm representing here are going to be placed with the east at the top, and you'll see it's open. And then there are the guardians of the gate. In this case, they are a little figure known as Donso, big fly. I'm told that as one walks on the desert, sometimes a big fly comes down and sits on one's shoulder. This big fly is the counterpart of the Holy Spirit. It is the voice of the mystery, and it is your guide. And it can be called big fly, or in another aspect, little wind. And isn't this interesting? The wind, spiritus, the spirit. We got it in Chief Seattle's. That's an archetype, the recognition of breath as the breath of life. Now I want to go back to the main myth of the Navajo, and it's a Pueblo myth as well as the one that is universal in this part of the world. It is of the first people having come up from the womb of the earth through a series of 4 stages. And they go from one stage to another. Some accident happens in the lower stages. A flood comes as a punishment for an impropriety of some sort, a breaking of a taboo or something of the sort, and they come on up. And finally, they come to the top level, the earth on which we are now. This is really an out-of-the-earth birth. And here's the ladder of emergence, and these are the first people with the plants and the animals round about that they discover here. And here is a special kind of mirage enclosing it. Now I must tell you, at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, many years ago, a team of Navajo singers came to show sand paintings and how they were made. And it was marvelous to watch these men take a colored sand in their hand and with great precision prepare these marvelous paintings. When they would prepare them, they would always leave out one detail. Now, when they're given to artists such as these have been given to artists to copy and then store in that museum of the Navajo art, something will be left out. That is to protect those who are dealing with the painting from its power. They're not supposed to have the power turned on. Well, they made one painting in the museum, and then they were asked, couldn't you just complete one painting, complete this one, for instance? And they laughed, and they said, if we finished this one, tomorrow morning every woman in Manhattan would be pregnant. So these things carry power. And then it was also interesting to watch them when the paintings were being destroyed, when they were being removed. They took that sand, and it was, the only thing I could think of was a Roman Catholic priest with the consecrated host in his hand. That's to say there was sacred power here. And they were not just brushed off and thrown away. They were put in a special container to receive them and taken somewhere else of which we know nothing. So here's the first part of the legend of emergence. Now I said that in Iceland we have this concept of landnam, land claiming. A specific place is identified on the reservation as the place of emergence. It wasn't the place of emergence. It is the ritual symbol of the place of emergence. And you consider the emergence mystery when you address yourself to that place. Then there's the mountain of the north, and the mountain of the south, and the mountain of the east, and the mountain of the west. The land is consecrated. It is a holy land in this way. Where did the myth come from? It came with the people to that place. And then they consecrated the place in terms of the myth that was with them.
To many, the myths of the American Indians seem like quaint superstitions. Did they really believe that man emerged from the womb of Mother Earth on a ladder? Maybe, but to ask such a question is to miss the point. For the American Indian, the place of emergence would actually shift from village to village or tribe to tribe. Its importance lay in its symbolic value, the ritual place to focus on the mystery of life. For the American Indian, everything in the world had both its concrete, physical reality and its spiritual reality. The rivers, the woods, the buffalo, all were secular and sacred at the same time. It is a way of perceiving the world totally alien to many of us whose experience of the sacred is reserved for an hour or so a week in church. The myths of the American Indian connected them to the mystery of life. Those same myths also provide the rituals to prepare them for the obstacles they face living in the real world. How does it work? The power of a story is in its telling.
Now I want to go through a specific legend. And this is the legend of where the two came to their father. These paintings I'm going to show now are not sand paintings, but pollen paintings, they're called. They're made of ground up corn and ground up petals of flowers and so forth and so on. When the Second World War started and the young men on the Navajo reservation were being drafted into the army, there was an old singer there named Jeff King. And a friend of mine who now is living in Carmel, Maud Oakes, had gone down to the Navajo country to learn the legend lore and to make paintings. She was a competent artist of the sand paintings and so forth. Well, she had really to seduce the old men into giving their stories to her. And the thing that persuaded them was the realization that the young men weren't learning these things anymore. These rituals are of 1 night, 3 nights, or 9 nights. And the singer has to know by heart an extremely elaborate mythology and ritual system. And there must be no mistakes, and there's always a second singer to supervise to make sure that no mistakes are made in the chanting. The young men are not putting themselves to learn all this anymore. And so the rituals are dying out. And the plea was that if they would give to the modern anthropologist investigator this material, it would be stored and would be kept as a treasure in the museum there of the American Indian, of the Navajo. At that time, this is back in the 30s, the normal Navajo family is described as having been of a father, a mother, 1 child, and 2 anthropologists. The Navajo was a real hunting ground for the anthropologists at that time. Well, when a young man would be drafted, his family might go to old Jeff King, who had been a military scout for the American Army when they were fighting the Apache, Geronimo, and so forth. And old Jeff King, who died in the middle or late 90s of his years, is buried as a military hero in the cemetery at Arlington. Well, Maud got him to give her the rite that he was performing over the young men going into the army. It was an old warrior ritual called Where the Two Came to Their Father. Having emerged from the underworld, the people were settled in this middle place here. And in the four directions are the mountains of the four directions, filled with the seeds of all things. This is the house of Changing Woman, a wonderful figure in the Navajo mythology. She was born miraculously of a cloud. And she became the mother then of these boys by miracle, by virgin birth. She was bathing at a little spring, and the sun shone upon her. And when she came home, she gave birth to a little boy. There were monsters troubling the neighborhood, and so she dug a little hole and put the boy down there in a kind of under-earth cradle to protect her from the monsters, and then went back to the spring to wash herself, and she conceived again, this time of the moon. And so she comes back, and here are her two little boys. The boy who was born of the sun is called Killer of Enemies. And here's the way he appears in the dance rituals. He is the warrior, outward directed. The boy who was born of the moon is called Child of the Water. And he is the medicine man, the shaman. The twin hero motif is common to many, many mythologies of the world. And they represent the warrior chieftain and his magician priest. Well, they're living with their mother, and they see that not only their mother, but the whole neighborhood is being troubled by monsters. And so they think they had better go and get help from their father, the sun. The sun is ultimately the father of them both, because the sun lights the light of the moon, so forth and so on, to help their mother. Now, their mother had told them, it's dangerous around here, boys, and you can go to the east, to the south, to the west, but don't go north. So they go north. That's the only way to get new material. Don't obey the community. They're the ones that are stuck or in trouble. So they are guided by Rainbow Man. They go to the mountains of the four quarters. Everything in the American Indian things is in fours. They circumambulate the world and are on their way. Now, this is a typical hero quest myth. When they come to the end of the known world, that's say when they reach the horizon, they are confronted by this threshold guardian, whose name is White Sands Boy. He is the guardian at the east. He has long arms. He seizes people and buries their head in the sand and so smothers them. He is the one who sees to it. The people don't go beyond the bounds of the mythology. The boys give him praise. They say, oh, wonderful White Sands Boy, there never was a thing in the world like you. And he'd never received such praise in his life. And so he said, okay, you can go on. And they make the round. There's White Sands Boy and Blue Sands Boy and so forth and so forth. And now they are beyond the bounds of the world. They're going along in a kind of featureless landscape, and they see an old, old woman, and her name is Old Age. And she says, oh, hello, boys. What are you doing way out here, you earth people? They say, we're on the way to our father's house, the sun, to get weapons to save our mother from the monsters. Oh, she says, that's a long, long way. You'll be old when you get there. But she said, I'll give you some advice. Don't walk on my path. Walk to the right of it. So the boys start walking along to the right, but then they forget. I know the heroes always forget. And they are walking on the path again. And they begin to feel old. And they have to pick up sticks and walk with these. And then finally they can't walk at all. And the old age, the old woman has been watching them. She comes and says, I told you. Well, they said, can't you make us young again? Or she said, if you'll be careful now, I'll do that. And so she spit on her hand and took moisture from under her armpits and from between her legs, and she rubs it over them, and they're made young again. And she said, now you stay on the right of the path. So they go along, and pretty soon they see another little old lady, black little old lady. Who's this? This is Spider Woman. Now, these spiders live in the ground, and this is kind of fairy godmother, the counterpart of the fairy godmother. She's the spirit of the earth mother itself, in the form of the old spider. And again, oh, hello, earth boys. What brings you out here? Oh, we're on the way to our father, the sun, to get weapons to save our mother. Oh, that's a long, long trip. You better come down into my little house, and I'll fix you up for that journey. And so she made the sun go fast. She has power over the sun itself, so that it should set, and they'd have to spend the whole night with her. Well, they thought it was a very little hole. How can we fit through that? But when it came time, there's no problem at all. They go down, and she feeds them certain food and gives them certain pieces of ebony and lapis lazuli or turquoise to swallow, and fixes them up for the journey, and tells them what the problems are going to be that they're going to meet, and she gives them a feather to protect them. Now here's the feather off here that little old Spider Woman gave the two boys. She says, hold this feather close and you'll get through all obstacles. Now here are the obstacles. The cactus that cut and the reeds that pierce and the rocks that clash together. They have been omitted because they're so powerful. Well, with these to help, the boys start on their path, and they do pass through these obstacles. Standard stuff. We've gone past the known world. Magical help comes to us in the form of some fairy mother godmother. The ways of the journey are predicted and overcome. The boys then come to the ocean that surrounds the world as a standard mythological motif. Okeanos of the Greeks and so forth and so on. We know that it surrounds the world because here are the four mountains of the four directions. In other words, they have translated a space into a flat picture. By the way, I might point out, in these pictures, the animals are not rendered naturalistically. These people know how to render all these things naturalistically. They're rendered in the form of their spiritual reference. The transformation of nature in art is rendering the nature phenomenon transparent to transcendence. The boys now cross the water with the feather between them by the magic power that has been given them. Then they're approaching the house of the sun. And this is guarded by four types of animal guardian. First, we have the serpents, the four serpents. The young man who is being trained to be a warrior, having his psychology transformed from that of secular to military consciousness, comes walking in along this line, kneels down here with his head over this basket of yucca suds. He undergoes a ceremonial washing, a purification. Purification before you have the revelation, and that's the sense of this rite. These then are the guardian bears, these are the guardian thunderbirds, and these are the guardian winds. The boys, having passed these, come to the house of the sun. Now here's the sun's house. It's a microcosm of the macrocosm with the four directions. Here is the sun's daughter. Here is the sun's horse. He rides around the world with his sun's shield. These are the steps of the boys and pauses where they meet the obstacles on the way. They arrive, the sun is off on his daily trip, and the boys are met by the sun's daughter. She says, who are you? They say, we're the sons of the sun. Oh, you are you? Huh. So she says, well, Daddy's not home now, but when he comes home, he's going to make it tough for you. So I'll protect you. And she wraps them in clouds of the four colors and stores them over the doors of their proper color. Over this door, she stows Killer of Enemies, and over this one, Child of the Water. So in the evening, the son arrives. He gets off his horse. He comes into the house. He hangs his shield on the wall, and it goes clunk, 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 clunk. And he turns to his wife and says, "Who are those two young men I saw coming in here today?" She says, "You've always told me you behave yourself when you go around the world. These boys say they're your sons." "Oh, they do they?" So he searches the house, and by gosh, he pulls them down. And then he submits them to tests. This is a favorite motif in American Indian stories. The father test or the father-in-law test or whatnot. He throws them against spikes of the 4 colors in the 4 directions, flint spikes. They hang on to the feather, 2 boys, 1 feather. Don't worry, this is myth. They survive. He gives them poison tobacco to smoke. They survive. He puts them in a sweat lodge and tries to sweat them to death. They survive. He finally says, "Well, I guess you are my sons. Come into the next room." So he takes them into the next room. He stands one of the boys on a black buffalo skin, the other on a white, and he tells them their true names, and each acquires his own true character. You remember before they were both black and the same size. Now they're taller, and Child of the Water is blue. Well, the description of that moment of initiation in that room where the thunders come in and lightnings come in, and wow, it's something terrific. But now they know who they are. This is the second birth through the father, the same thing we'd been talking about. And when they have survived that, they are so powerful, they split into 4. This yellow is the counterpart of the Killer of Enemies, and the white, the counterpart of Child of the Water. And now in full power, they start back across the cosmic ocean. They come to the hole in the sky. Now the feather that they're riding on here is not the one that Spider-Woman gave them, it's the one their father has given them. Their father now at the hole in the sky gives them a final examination. What's your name? What's the name of the northern mountain? What's the name of the hole in the earth? And all this kind of thing. And the answers are whispered to them by Big Fly and Little Wind. Now you may say this is cheating, but it isn't cheating. If they weren't worthy of this, they would not have received the inspiration. So there you are. If you're meant to pass the exam, you'll pass. So having passed the exam, they come down to the central mountain, Mount Taylor, and there you see their footprints landing on the mountain. Now, before they go to work to kill the specific monsters that are troubling their mother, they have to kill the archetypal monster. And he lives here by this lake. And his name is Big Lonesome Monster. Now, the characteristic of monsters is that they mistake shadow for substance. And so this big, lonesome monster sees the 2 boys reflected in the lake. And you see these are the other 2, the second 2. Oh, he thinks, I can drink them up and digest them to death. So the big, lonesome monster, mistaking shadow for substance, drinks up the lake and digests hard, and then spits it out again, and by gosh, there they are. He drinks up the lake 4 times. Now, even a monster's worn out after that performance, and so the boys move in. Now, interestingly, this monster is also a son of the sun. But the son moves in to help the boys kill the monster. You've got this ambiguity about virtue and vice and pairs of opposites and all that. So the monster is killed, and now they're ready to go home. When they come past the foot of Mount Taylor, they trip, and their father weapons are gone. They have moved from the realm of sheer male fire into the mixed realm of water, where the fire is mingled with earth. And so they are met by Talking God, who is the male ancestor of the female line of the gods. He is mixed of male and female, and he gives them a talking prayer stick to guide them that is made of male and female corn. they're given double weapons here now, male and female weapons. And this energy coming from them in the form of flints indicates that they're filled with magic power, and they're still riding on the feather. Now, just to show you this very interesting God, talking God. His mouth and eyes are made of masculine rain and female mist coming up in this form. His nose is of a cornstalk. He has given them the weapons to kill the earthly monsters. And after a terrific series of battles killing these tremendous monsters, the boys are nearly wiped out. They're so worn out, they've lost their arms and legs, and Child of the Water is in danger of just becoming the reflection of killer of enemies. And so the gods come down and enact a ceremony over them, and they're given health again. And what do you suppose the ceremony is? It's the one I've just told you, the ceremony of their own life story. Just as the psychoanalyst leads you back to remember all those things of childhood and you put you on your proper path again, so they. And when they have passed this test and gone through this ceremony, they are again 4. And this is the strongest sand painting of the lot, the 4 boys, each standing on the mountain of his own color. Now, when Maud Oakes had received this ceremony from Jeff King, he had omitted this picture. And when he had finished, he said, well, that's it. Maud said, no, Jeff, there must be another picture. Now, she knew enough to know what was required in a mythological ceremonial situation. No, he said, I've given you everything. No, Jeff, she said. Okay, he said, I'll give it to you. So we got the whole story here. This is a typical mythological adventure, leaving the bounded world in which you have been brought up, going beyond all that anybody knows into domains of transcendence, and then acquiring what is missing and coming back with the boon. It's a perfectly beautiful example of this system.
Campbell has often said that people think of myth as other people's religion. For many, the subject of study, fascination, or even spiritual insights, but always at a safe distance. Things get a bit tricky when we flip the equation and try to think of our religion as myth. Our spiritual tradition in the West is Judeo-Christian, the Old Testament, the Bible. To talk about this tradition as mythology and to compare it to the myths of the American Indian is to invite controversy. Campbell does compare them and offers his opinions with a passion. For him, the American Indian stands as an example of a people with a living, vital mythology, in harmony with the natural world. But what of our mythology, our religion? Can it be reconciled with our modern scientific understanding of the natural world?
And so I thought I would conclude with this figure of the spirit land, again back to our Navajo, and you have the central source and the mountains of the 4 directions, the figures that we've learned to know. But important here in a new way are these 4 marks, which are interpreted as the 4 stages of a lifetime: the infancy, childhood, maturity, and age. I would say that there's no conflict between mysticism, the mystical dimension and its realization, and science. But there is a difference between the science of 2000 BC and the science of 2000 AD. And we're in trouble on it because we have a sacred text that was composed somewhere else by another people a long time ago and has nothing to do with the experience of our lives. And so there's a fundamental disengagement. And besides, when we look back at that text, it is a text that speaks of man as superior to nature, man's mastery over nature as being what has been given to him, and just compare that with the words of Black Elk. This is the difference between mythology as a petrifact, something that has dried up, is dead, and is not working, and mythology as something that is working. When the mythology is alive, you don't have to tell anybody what it means. It's like looking at a picture that's really talking to you. It gets to you. And if you have to ask the artist, what does that mean? If he wants to insult you, he'll tell you. The myth must work like a picture. And it can be explicated, yes, if you've already got it, interpreted, amplified, and so forth. But it must work, and we've lost it.
What exactly have we lost? How and when did we lose it, and who is the we Campbell is talking about? Join us next time as Joe Campbell introduces us to our mythic forebears and gives us some of his answers to these questions.